Farmer takes in 115 volts and puts out 10,000. If I'd reached up there and put my finger over that and got it about a half inch closer, it'd knock me clean up against that wall and make my balls ache for a solid month. And I mean ache. It'd make the old family jewels just swell up. Did you ever have it happen to you? We was talking about the fire. Let me show you something. That's hot. Now, you notice I got a plastic handled screwdriver. There are wood screwdrivers that's got the metal up the sides and in the back. Those fancy, real fancy, beautiful wooden, with the rivets through it. Don't use it. Throw them away, right? Because I guarantee you, if you ever get hit with, and you will, working on heaters someday, I guess all of us has been touched with them, haven't we? These things will knock your eye teeth just, I don't even have eye teeth to make them ache. You got some more? That's a good picture. Looks like something out of Buck Rogers, don't it? That's the way I test the, you know, I'm real fancy. That's the way I test the transformer. That transformer's hot. If there's anything, reason that heater's not running, it ain't the transformer. One of the points, though, that I might point out that I've often run into is that the bus bars on the draw assembly, these bus bars are brass and should be even and put up to a point where when you put the heater back together, when you put it in the hole and you close the transformer up, and the wires is not in the way, of course, there should be some resistance to push it down. That means that your contacts are good and solid. Now, what if we got a good transformer and you got a good fire and yet your heater's not firing off? The first initial thing you got to check is the pressure on that pump. If that pump is putting out raw fuel, or in other words, if the pressure's down to 80 pounds, 75 pounds, 70 pounds, and it's putting out raw fuel, that spark, no matter how damn hot it is, ain't going to fire it. You know, first thing you do is go right back to that pump. Don't go screwing with the wiring. You know, the wiring's okay. You just get that pump working, right? You got anything to add to that?
One of the first things I check is the pump. Pressure on the pump. As soon as I put it back together, put a gauge on it when I fire it up.
What if you put a gauge on it and you fired it up and you had 100 pounds pressure and you still didn't get it to fire? What would be wrong with it? Can you think about what would be wrong with the heater? Can you think of anything?
Could be bad cat cell. Why it wouldn't fire?
Now you got spark, but it ain't fire. It ain't lighting. It ain't burning. And the pump's putting out 100 pounds pressure. You know that. You've got the gauge on it, right? Where's those little nozzles?
Where?
You got your hand on it. If you got 100 pounds pressure and the electrodes are firing, it can't be anything but a nozzle. That's your next point of resistance, right? You know, some of the things that I've seen happen in the past is people try to clean them. You can't clean these nozzles. These nozzles are not cleanable. As a matter of fact, you can't blow through that nozzle with your own body and blow through a 1-gallon nozzle. You ain't got enough strength in your body to do it. So one little tiny piece of dirt, just one very fine piece of dirt, can really clog it up. That's the reason for all the filters, points of filter. That's the reason that the oil filter on the unit should and must be cleaned regularly if you're going to expect it to run right. Now, the reason I stopped messing with that CAD cell, you know why I stopped messing with it? Because yesterday we blew it. If this heater is running properly and you turn it on, that little bulb right there should be glowing. It glows all the time. If it ain't glowing, something's wrong. You know, and I think the something wrong is, yesterday I did just what I did today when it went zip, And one little short like that can blow that little fuse on there, and away you go. Now, see, if this is in a sales meeting, I wouldn't even mention that because they say, well, that's pretty fragile. Well, it is. It's a printed circuitry built to activate on millivolts of electricity, and you can really screw it up real quick without any real effort. All right, now, if we know that the back end of that Wayne burner is all functioning properly, and this heater, the fan motor won't come on, you'll fire up, and then the fan motor won't come on, the fire up, the fan motor won't come on. The simplest, easiest way to check the fan switch is just to short through it, just like that. Let me stick this back up in there, and then we'll show you. Well, come on.
A little light lighting here.
Huh?
A little light is flashing now.
Is it flashing down? Well, then I got a bad switch. Usually if that switch is bad and you do that, the switch will the heater will come on. You know what they... I had one guy monkeying around in here yesterday, and I know what he did. Okay. Yes, sir. It does get a little hot.
I got it. Let him talk, get mine. Mine, I won't say.
Now let's see what it does. Ah, you dirty rat. I didn't make it. I just tore up the... There you go. Well, enough of that. We'll stop right there. What happened was that the guys pulled all the wires off, and we got a wire I got a wire in there now that's loose, and it's not making connections on that fan switch. But the way I check the fan switch is if the burner will come on and the fan won't run, I just simply cross-check the fan switch. Now, before we get away from all this, I want to talk to you about what we talked about earlier. I want to talk to you about thermostats. And we talked about it at breakfast. You know, this thermostat sells to your customer for about $29 and some cents, the way you price it. It's probably the best thing you could sell him because it'll save him half his fuel. And it's a simple thermostat to use, and yet it seems that everybody gets confused with it, you know. And what I told the rest of the guys, and you can take this off the record too, this is for mechanics only, for you guys only. Inside the box, thermostat box is a... See, this thing sits on the shelf in the store in a brown box like that, and it doesn't really say anything to anybody. And unless a customer says, I want a thermostat, nobody monkeys with it. But inside the box is it doesn't need a parts list because we don't sell parts for the thing, but there's a White Rogers explanation of how the unit works. If you'll take that or a part of it, just this where it says space heating thermostat like that, and cut it out, sign your name to it, Send it to Ben. Ben will co-sign it. Send it to me, and I'll send you $1 for every one you sell. Now I'm saying this because you see, the salespeople in the sales room have their own job to do. But you guys are getting heaters in that's been out 10, 12, 5, 7, 8 years. And I want you to think about talking to that man who you repaired his heater about remote thermostats. Now there's two kinds of thermostats that you'll see. There'll be one that looks like this that says CMT 230. That's Gene Vocker's thermostat. I have that made for me by White Rogers. There's another one that's a little square box that's got a hook on top of it. That's an A unit made by Penn Far Century, and I don't get anything on that. This is the one to sell, if you want the $1, right? Now, if you sell 100 of them, I'll send you $100. If you sell 500 of them, I'll send you $500. If you sell one, I'll send you $1. Okay? All you got to do is to give me that. Is that a good enough deal? Pick up some easy money that way. Because all you have to do is say to that customer, well, I fixed your heater. Have you ever thought about using a remote thermostat? And he says, well, no. Then explain to him it'll save him fuel, and it'll make the area a lot more comfortable to work under. And I keep this up. In the front of the heater is a little jumper plug. It's created a lot of confusion in its day. This little jumper plug is not, I repeat, is not just a dead-end plug. This is not what you buy to put in your baby's bedroom to keep her from getting shocked or he from getting shocked. This is what we call a continuity plug. It is a solid piece of brass that goes into the plug and back out again, and you can take a clothes hanger and cut it and make a U shape and stick in it and do the same job. This creates a flow of electricity to the heater, and without this, the heater won't run. That's the 120, the 155, and the 230. It will not run. This plugs into the heater in the front of the heater. Now, you know, we run through a procedure. If you turn the heater on, the fire comes on, the heater gets up to 105, turns the fan on, right? Conversely, when you turn the heater off, the fan continues, the fire goes out, the fan continues to run until the inside is down to 105 and it shuts itself off. That's purging. And the purging of the heater is what makes the heater last so long. So this heater, we work on heaters that's 20 years old, and they still are good. They still are very serviceable heaters, where the inline heaters are designed to last 3 to 5 years, and then they just used up. Now, because this heater purges is the reason that it lasts so long. It's the reason that it's been in the system so long. It's the reason that we sell so damn many of them. It keeps the hot heat going where it belongs, out where the guy can use it, and not in the heater where it's going to burn the motors up, the wirings up, and everything else, just like it does on the little heaters. Now, in order to make that purging cycle continue with a thermostat control, we plug the thermostat on this heater, on these 3 heaters, into the heater system like that, and you put the jumper on top, and not in the how did I get over there? And not into the supply cord. Now, for the newer men who don't know what I'm talking about, this supply cord on the other heaters is the only way to stop and start the heater. You don't have a switch on that heater. All you have is a power cord. You plug the power cord into the power source and the heater's on. When you want it to turn it off, you pull the cord. On the air scoop heaters, you plug the power source in, then you plug the thermostat in, you turn the unit on, and theoretically it's not supposed to run until you set the thermostat. It's too hot. Thermostat is an 80, it's a 40 to 80 degree thermostat, and like right now in here it's hotter under that light than that 80 degrees, and it won't turn itself on. Okay? Now, if this thermostat was working, let's see, maybe the one in the box be cooler. There goes the- I'm gonna have to do something, aren't I? Okay. Now, what happens is when you put the thermostat on like I've done now, this is going to react exactly the same as a house thermostat. In other words, the thermostat is going to start that heater and stop the heater when the thermostat tells it to. If you want 45 degrees or like hogs are very happy at 50 degrees. You set the heater at 50 degrees, at 48 it'll turn it on, at 52 it'll turn it off. That's what reason the guy saves so much fuel with it. It doesn't use the heater when you don't need it. If you're working in a shop and let's say that a farmer is in and out of the shop all the time, so he's dressed heavy, and all he'll want is 55 to 60 degrees inside the shop. He sits it at 60, and at 58 it turns on, at 62 it turns off. Boy, it'll save you money like you wouldn't believe. Just like you wouldn't believe. Now, some of the things that there it goes. So some of the ideas that we have, that we think that everybody just takes for granted, we find that that isn't true. With this type of unit, you can plug an extension cord in the unit and then plug the thermostat in the extension cord and take the thermostat back down that wall where it belongs. In other words, if you're going to use this heater in this room, you'd probably set the heater in the center of the room on that end. This thermostat should be on that perimeter back there if you want this whole room at 60 degrees. So you can use a 25, 50, 100, 200-foot extension cord to get the thermostat where it's going to do the best job for you. That make sense? You can run it up the ceiling, across the ceiling, and down. In other words, you could run the thermostat clean across the room. The idea is that you need to get the thermostat away from the heater. This is the way to do it. That makes sense to you? It really surprised me. Well, I'd like to listen to that tape and let's get done with this. Yeah. When I found out at the stores that most of the people selling these heaters in your stores, first of all, didn't know that a thermostat was available, and then didn't know how to hook them up. Now let's take an inline heater like this little 100,000, and I said it's an on and off heater. It has no purging. Of course, it sells considerably cheaper, but you have a power cord. Now, if you hook the power cord into the extension cord, where is it at? Into the extension cord like that, and then you take the other end. Let's go over to where the power is, and you plug the extension cord into the thermostat, and the thermostat into the wall. Now, the idea is that the thermostat's got to stay where the electrical outlet is, but you can take the heater from where you want it, right? You can put the heater over in that corner,
Gene, couldn't you remote that again by running another cord from there to the heater?
Well, no, not really. Well, you're running a cord from there to the heater. That's what you have.
Between where you've got that plugged in, okay, and the wall, couldn't you bridge it again? In other words, put an extension cord from that plug on.
Oh,
the
yeah,
wall.
if you wanted to put this, if the energy plug's there, and you want to put the thermostat on that wall, and put the heater up against that wall, Yeah, you could, from where we plugged it in here, that's what Dave means. From there, you put another extension cord from there to that wall plug and put it wherever you want it. And we're teeing it off. All this becomes is a 115 volt mercury on and off switch. That's all it amounts to. And I belabor it really in these meetings only because, you see, in the year of energy shortage, you can't sell anything better than an energy saver. 10-4? And it doesn't matter if the guy's had the heater 100 years, it'll still run off of a 115 volt thermostat. The guys in at the floor, we hope that they will sell the units, the thermostats with new units. You guys have a separate kind of problem. You're dealing with people of all stages. Okay, got that far. What else did I need to tell you? I need to tell you about fuel tanks. Oh, yeah. And you know, I didn't realize it, but I had one of those things, Ben, in my car. In your stores, you'll see knocking around in your heater department a thermostat that looks like this. You seen that before? You know what it is? Now that's in a box and it's in your, it's yeah, mercury type thermostat. And what it is, it's for exhaust fans. It's a reverse thermostat. You set the unit, like if you set it at 90, let's say at 90 degrees, that's what I want to set it at, 90 degrees, and you wire it into the electric source to your exhaust fan. When it gets 90 degrees in that barn, shed, house, wherever, this thermostat will then kick on and start exhausting. If it exhausts enough where the temperature then drops down below 90 degrees, it shuts the unit off. It opens up. It just works just the opposite of the heater thermostat. But it looks the same, don't it? Even got the little thing on the bottom. Now, what we want you to understand is that this is a very saleable product with fans. It really ain't very good on heaters, you know. Now, the one thing you can identify, you know, it's got no cord on it. So you have to put a cord on it. It's really made for fans because, see, fans are, you cut a hole in the wall and you mount the fan and you mount the thermostat and you wire it in. You actually have someone, an electrician or yourself, wire it in. Where ours is all portable, all plug-in stuff. You know, ours, you plug it in, you plug it out, right? We don't want nobody wiring or venting or messing or whatever. You understand that? Because it can create some problems, I think. And I didn't tell that to the sales people because I saw them in the stores. I just didn't realize when I saw them that the people in the stores didn't realize what the hell they were for. They didn't. Everett's going to put out a bulletin on it so that everybody knows it, but off of that, on the tanks. On the air scoop heaters, especially the air scoop heaters, you notice we have a tank that looks very similar to the 100,000 BTU tank, and the reason we did that was that up till about 1974, we had a wraparound tank. It looked different than this, and if you look in your parts book and look under 155s prior to 1974, I think that's the way it is, you'll see that there's a wraparound tank, and it was a very good tank for us. We used that tank for years, but the company decided to standardize on tanks. That tank and this tank are the same tank, see? But if you have a wraparound tank come to you that's leaking, the only thing you can do for your customer is to advise him to take it to a welding shop and have them put a patch on it. We can't supply that wraparound tank anymore. It's run out of its time limit, and they don't want to supply it. If you want to put this type of tank on one of those old heaters, it takes all new handles and everything to do it, and it just more than the man should pay. You know, The automobile putty will do it. I know a lot of guys that use this new epoxy stuff that you stick, and it works very good. But you can also wire brush that surface. Now, I wouldn't do it if I were you. You shouldn't do this. This should be done by some welding shop. But you can wire brush it and take a piece of galvanized or a piece of aluminum and lay it on and braze it on, and the heater won't look very good, but it'll work just fine. You know, you see it? Yeah, if you look at that, see that tank just looks different. See how that tank looks? Page 21. You got it? Are they going to come in and let us order, Benny?
No, supposed to be buffet, I'll check.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just simple. That's one of the things I needed to tell you about the tanks. Now, you know, you will have people bring you those old tanks that's rusted out, and they'll want you to replace the tank, and you can't do it. I've exhausted. I even considered having the tank made in St. Louis, and I couldn't get anybody to make it for me. The tank sold when we were supplying them for like 12 bucks, and you can't put that tank together for 12 bucks individually. No, you just tell them they have to go someplace to have it patched up. Or, if the heater's that old and that rusty and that bad, usually you could talk him into trading it in and buying himself a new one. You know, he really should at that point. You know, talking about that, just as we end up for the morning, the theory of repairs in the heater industry, and I can only just give you a theory, is that if a brand new heater is selling for $300 and the old heater has a repair on it going that's going to be $150, the man should be told about it and given the option of whether or not he wants to spend $150 on the old one or buy a new one for $300. You know, this is what we do. When we get to half the price of a new unit, we then stop. We don't repair his unit, we advise him of what his options are. You know, I think if it were me, if I was going to spend $150, I'd rather put another $150 and buy a new unit if it got that bad. Don't you see? We do this now. We are the central repair station for jet. That to you guys, it's Duracraft. You know, on the drill presses and the vices and the bench grinders and the air tools. We're very conscious of that because the price of the material today is getting to the point where oftentimes it's better for him to buy a new one. It's cheaper for him to buy a new one than to repair the old one. We have some product like a half-inch drive impact wrench that we sell to the store for 60 bucks. They merchandise it out for say $85 and you can't repair it for $85. It's like hydraulic jacks. We sell hydraulic jacks by the carload. You can't repair a hydraulic jack for what we sell it for today. You got a ton and a half jack sitting on your shelf that you're selling for $8.50. You can't take it apart and put leathers in it for $8.50. That's the theory in repairs that I get to. There's sometimes it demands better. It's even better for you to say, all right, I'll repair it for $8.50. Oh, that's fine. Just go and get a new one, hand it to it. You know, it's repaired.
Not feasible.
No, it works. It does for me. So what are we going to eat? How about it, Benny? It's 12 minutes to the hour. And what's happened, you have a... Do I put this thing on now? Well, I had a box sitting right there, didn't I? I guess I do have a box sitting right there. On the front of an air scoop heater, you have a draw assembly. It looks like that. If you were to open that heater up and look inside of it, the combustion chamber has 3 legs, and the combustion chamber comes back and sits about 1/4 of an inch back on that draw assembly. And because of the size of the draw assembly and the smallness of a 120, we really don't have too much problems with the 120, but in the 230, the biggest one, and the 155, if they've jammed that heater enough times, they can knock those little legs out of adjustment in front, and make the combustion chamber just fall down over the front of the air tube, a quarter of an inch. And unless you look closely for it, you won't see it. Because if you look at the front of the heater's got a baffle on it. You can't see in it. Okay? But when that falls down over, it won't do anything but just stink like hell, and you won't know it until you really look at it hard and take it apart. Now, what I do, if I got a heater that I've done everything else with, I take a flashlight, and you can take a flashlight and look right down in that combustion chamber and see it. You can see it falling over the front. But you won't see it unless you're looking for it, right?
That's right.
And the heater will burn, it won't smoke, but you'll get real heavy odors. When I say heavy odors, I mean to burn your eyes.
Hey,
Like I said, the 120 has never been too much of a problem because the size of the combustion chamber and those legs doesn't allow it to move that, but the bigger the heater, the more flexibility it has, and that cone never changes. And on the 230 especially, I have had many of them where I've had odors and found that was the trouble. I tell them on the phone, take a flashlight and look right directly in on top of it and see if it's sitting on top. Well, you know it is. And I said, well, I bet you it ain't.
how do you cure it?
I just straighten it up and put it back on is all I do.
What I usually do is take it, just shove it back on there a little bit and re-drill me the holes with anchors in there and
Yeah.
set it back a half inch.
If you take off the cone off the front of the heater, and I guess I should turn it around where these young people can see it. If you take that cone off, it's got a couple screws. Inside there's 3 screws that holds the baffle in. You take the baffle out, and you can look in and see the combustion chamber then very clearly. You get it back up in place, and if those 3 legs are bent bad enough, you might have to drill. And you know, to make it move back. It should sit just about a quarter of an inch back on that cone. That cone sits up like that inside there. Got it? Now, it isn't something that you'll find maybe once every 3 years or something. Sometimes you find a couple of them at a time, but it isn't
This was 4 years old this year.
yeah. And it isn't something that's real common. It's just something you should look for. Now, while I got this out, let me explain something to you that you need to know. On the air scoop heaters, the 120 and the 155, which, of course, is our claim to fame, right? These are the ones that really put Champion Heater Company in the heater business. We know our biggest single constant problem is that the guys are going to burn number 2 fuel oil in them. And there ain't a heck of a lot you can do about it because the guy who's owned the heater, his uncle, cousin, the deacon in his church, somebody will tell him that he's selling him kerosene, and really what he's selling him is number 2 fuel oil. And we wrestled with it for years. Wayne came up with a new air tube. This air tube is a little different than the one that was in the old heaters, a little bit longer, and it's got a different swirler on it. That front's different. Now, what we've done is we tested these out last year, and by golly, this air tube and with a new nozzle in the same nozzle, just a clean nozzle in the unit, makes the unit burn number 2 fuel oil pretty clean. So if you got a guy that's got a real odor problem, he comes and tells you he's got a real odor problem, we will give you'll have, John's got them in distribution now, and there's the box. And it's a box, got a number on it, A200-22 or A223 for 155. And what we want to do is give this kit to the customer free this year. If he says, I got a 120 and boy, or 5 120s, whatever, and I got a lot of odor, don't tell him you got wrong fuel and everything, because he ain't never going to believe you anyway. Just say, I think we got something that would really take care of your problems, and I'm allowed to give it to you if you don't tell anybody. You know, do it that way. You know, make yourself a hero. And you can give him the box. It's got a diagram in it that explains how to install it very simply. It also has the air tube, and we don't want the old one back. You don't have to give us the damn thing back. Just throw them away. And now all the 1979-80 heaters, all the heaters you got in this year, already have this in it. It's part of the heater. We don't want to tell these characters that this thing burns number 2 fuel oil, but sure as we do, they're going to be burning 4 R diesel fuel and say, well, if you said it burned number 2, why in the hell won't it burn 4, right? So what we want to do is just say to them, this will solve your problems. Now, if they want you to install it, it's not a warranty, it's just an upgrade on a product. They want you to install it, you charge them regular shop labor rates. You don't have to charge them for the part, of course, because we give you the part, you know. But if he says that, you can say, okay, let me fix it up for you. Now, that's only on the 120 and the 155 air scoops. How's that grab you?
Pretty good.
Ain't bad, huh? Calling that ain't bad as I call him Babe Ruth a fair hitter. That's damn good, isn't it? Now, they're going to get us some propane heaters. And while we're waiting for them, my boss told me at lunch that I kind of goofed up, and I said, well, how did I do that? And he said, you didn't tell him about the compressor too good. And I said, well, I reckon I didn't. I don't know if you all realize it, but when you put a new rotor in the air compressor, that the outer ring is adjustable where you can make the rotor just miss touching the outer ring so that the vanes have a good tight surface to work on. Did you know that? See, what I should have showed you is that number one, when you look at the unit, that notch always says that's the top of the motor. That's up. If we had this off, and you got 2 screws holding the race on, if you loosen those 2 screws, it is adjustable, and you turn your rotor until you get just a good clean clearance. Now that rotor isn't always 1,000% round. It's not, but you make it tight on the tightest spot. You might get loose on other spots, but you can adjust that and get that closeness. You want it as close as you can get it without it dragging. Is that plain? Okay, boss? There you go. He's the boss. Man, I reckon. Now, what we should do before we get into the propane end of the business is talk about any problems you might have. Is there anything you guys want to talk about, you want to bring up that bugs you or bothers you, or you think we ought to have a rap session and talk about before we get into propane? The reason that I'm doing this is because if you do have anything confusion you now about these heaters, we should talk about it. I'll repeat myself and say that they're the simplest damn things in the world. If Gene Vocker can work on heaters, Tim can do a better job. They're just not hard to work on. I think they're so simple that we try to make them sound complicated at times. But you notice we didn't talk about any feeler gauges. We didn't talk about any special test equipment. We talked about the general mechanics of a heater, and that's really what it's all about. And I always get back to the parts that you can't control, and that's the fuel. You can't control fuel. You can't control a guy who has low voltage. If you got a guy that's got low voltage on his farm, if he's run a lamp cord from the house 500 yards out to the pole barn where he's got a couple old sows farrowing, and he wonder why his heaters don't work, you can't help that. You can't do anything for him. You can only recognize it for what it is when the guy talks to you about it. I think, when you see a guy going ape over a camera like that, it scares me to death. Before we get off oil heaters, I'm going to do something that maybe somebody might really get unhappy with me about, but I don't think he will, because he knows we're good guys. Tuesday, Everett Renfrew told us that His constant concern about the people who work for him, you guys, is that how can he constantly get better income for you and justify the income, in other words. So what he devised was that he's going to give you, I don't want to call it tests, it's qualifying questionnaires that will qualify you. What word do you have for it?
Certification.
Certification on the products that you're supposed to know how to repair. So I had made up a little questionnaire thing on what we've talked about this morning on inline heaters. Now I'm going to do something maybe I shouldn't do. I'm going to give you a copy of what it is. Because I can't move around too good, Tim. Why don't you pass those around for me? And while we're waiting for the propane heaters, I'm going to run through these real quickly for you. Certification only means, you know, I know what I'm talking about, right? Now, I personally don't like tests. I think tests are for the birds. I always have thought so because taking a test always appeared to me to be putting a mental bind on a guy that you know, that you don't want a mental bind on you anyway. So you'll find that when I made these up, that they're very simple and very easy to answer. So now I just want to run through it with you quickly. And then when you get this test, whenever it comes up, if you got a good memory, you won't forget it, right? Now the first thing says the first symptom you notice is that the heater is pulsating or firing unevenly. What could the cause be and how would you correct it? All right, just to show you the first question, A would be the fuel level is low or the heater is not setting level. Now naturally, if the fuel level is low and it's not picking up fuel, it's going to do just what it says, right? Or if you set the heater uphill, which means that it's picking up in the center of the heater and you turn it up like this, and the fuel is running down that end and there's no fuel where the standpipe is, it's going to burn unevenly, isn't it? Or if it burns at all. But another answer could be, for that same question, it would be that to be water in the fuel, right? I mean, that's simple enough. How about the air pressure? The air pressure could be low. If the air pressure is low, it's not picking up correctly and it's not going to burn evenly. D, how about the rubber nozzle seal leaking air into the oil passage? Now, we talked about that little seal, and it can be the cause of exactly the same condition. That little seal right there. If that seal isn't sealing right, it'll spit and sputter and do all kinds of crazy things. All right, number 2, the motor does not start when the heater's plugged in. What do you reckon the most obvious answer to that would be?
Bad motor?
Well, that's a good one.
To be a relay?
No power in the wall.
It ain't plugged in. You know, in other words, it's plugged in, but the switch ain't throwing. You know. I put down there's no power to the heater. Check the power source, fuses, cord, etc. B, the circuit breaker on the unit has been tripped. Press the reset button. You remember what we talked about the ETA breaker? You got to push the button in, you know. Or C, there's a loose wire connection on the circuit breaker or other electrical components. That's all the wiring I told you. When the wires come off, it don't work. The reset of the motor is defective, you know, and on the 151, of course, the motor relay that sits up on the motor that gives it the inertia to start could be bad. Now that's what I tried to do all the way down through. The motor runs but very slowly. What would be the causes? Low voltage condition exists. Check the power source. Check the length and gauge of any extension cords you might be using. Or it could be that the compressor is adjusted too tight. With the unit unplugged, turn the fan by hand. See if if you put a new rotor in and that rotor it binds on either side of either one of those plates, it's going to pull that motor down and make the motor run slow. That's simple, isn't it? If the fan turns freely by hand, the motor is probably defective. Now, that is, if the motor runs but very slowly. Now, that's the question. It's also a good idea to check the motor start relay to see if it's placing a drag on the motor. That's on the 151. All right, number 4 would be the combustion chamber on your heater has been burned out or damaged so badly that it must be replaced. What would the 4 most natural answers be? Number 1, the air pressure was too high. If the air pressure is too high and it's burning too hot, it can burn it out. Not enough fan blowing circulation air has been entering the heater. In other words, if you have a fan that's on the hub and the set screw is loose and every once in a while it slips, and it can do it, I've seen it do it, but it does it only when the heater gets up to full RPM. You could slow down the air circulation and it could burn the combustion chamber up. And C would be gasoline was used in the fuel mixture. Or D, not enough air was discharging from the end of the heater because of insufficient clearance and the use of pipe or ductwork attached to the discharge end. Now, I only did that to try to remind me to say to you is that we have a lot of people ask us, can you duct these heaters into ductwork, you know. The heater puts out heat and is designed to put out the right kind of heat without any back resistance. If you put ductwork on here, you have to leave at least 1 inch clearance around the outer perimeter of the combustion of the outside area, like this. And then you have to put on the other end of the ductwork some kind of a fan to help pull that heat through it. That fan is not designed to push air up through ductwork. If you notice, all ductwork fan work is always a squirrel cage motor, and a squirrel cage motor becomes a constant displacement fan. It scoops the air and pushes it. These are straight fans, and straight fans, when they get too much back pressure on them, just oscillates in its own air pocket. It doesn't push anything. Are you with me? Now, well, we've got a few minutes. Why don't you read down through the rest of them? I won't say anything, and if you any of them that you don't think you could answer, let's talk about it. Is that okay, boss? When we talk about propane now, we get off of oil, the service in the propane gets to be totally different than it does on oil. The propane really is a very simple fuel and very easy heaters to work on, and the maintenance is. But one of the things I used in our last sales meeting, as we went around the stores, was why propane? You know, and these are things that you, as a serviceman, got to take into consideration. And just very quickly, propane is a gas, and gas is not capable of smoking. An oil heater, if the ventilation is inadequate, if the fuel is wrong, if the pressure is wrong, I give you a few hundred other items, you can make that heater smoke. And if you make that heater smoke, and we're working in this room, that ceiling would get just a nice dull gray, and sometimes even black, you know. My wife used to get very mad at me because I worked on all my heaters in my garage, and my garage gets pretty sooty, you know. Dirty as hell, real bad. But gas heaters, when I worked on propane gas heaters don't smoke. Now, reason this way, if you're talking to a customer or to yourself, you only got 2 kinds of cook stoves in kitchens, and they're gas stoves and electric stoves. And the reason they're gas stoves is the gas can't smoke. That's the only reason you see gas stoves in kitchens. Isn't that neat? That's simple, too. Number 2, you can take a propane heater. We got another one here. Did we bring the 150 in?
No, they didn't have.
Didn't have one.
No 150?
Is that the standing upright one?
No, it looks just like this one, only bigger. Wow. sold out already. 'Cause I know you had them. You know. Okay, we can take this heater. This is a new little 40,000 BTU heater, and we can make that heater work like a home furnace. In other words, we could hook it up to a big enough cylinder outside that house and run the proper copper tubing to it, and that heater would just run on and on and on and on. Now, the reason that that's such a difference is that on oil heaters, every 8 to 12 hours, you got to come back and fill them up, right? On this one, you can make it just work on and on. It's a convenience thing, and that's something they're doing this year, and I think I'm, you know, first thing when I get to my factory meeting, I'm going to tell them who's the dumb broad that put that on. Had to be a broad. No man would do that. So you can make the heater burn longer, and it's a lot more convenient for the customer for it to burn longer. Now, the C is I think, is one of the most important. We can make heaters using propane, because propane's a gas trying to escape from a bottle, where you can make a heater that doesn't take any electricity. When weather starts hitting like we have out there right now, where you got rain and sleet and snow, and the line starts falling, and the farmer or the homeowner's out of electricity, and they've got to keep things going, they've either got to use a wood stove, or they got to use a gas stove, and the way they usually use the gas stove is light up the stove in the kitchen, and if they don't have a stove in the kitchen, if it's electric, they've got to get something in that house to keep the shit houses from freezing. Boy, if they freeze, they break. And you want to see something sad, see a 4-bathroom house with all the toilets broke in it, and that happens. But we can take a heater, a propane heater, 100,000 BTU salamander, put it in the basement of that house, and efficiently keep the house warm enough where it'll have no damage until the electricity is restored. Now, the big thing is that you don't have to have any flue, and it won't smoke up the joint, okay? Those are the reasons for propane. Extremely low maintenance. Now, since we're not working with, we don't have the wrong fuel, the wrong kinds of fuel, and all this kind of crud. We have no fuel pumps on a propane heater. All that reduces the maintenance. It reduces it to a point where it's a simple heater to work on. All you have to understand is the system of safety features on a heater to make it work right. As a matter of fact, on 150,000 in my territory, and I got Missouri and Kansas and a few assigned accounts, and Quality isn't one of them. I do not sell propane heaters to Quality. I did sell you a propane salamander, but Dave Nadovich decided that he would just buy that same salamander, or one like it, from National Riverside, who I don't represent to you people. And I lost you know, this has been a disastrous year as far as Gene Vocker and Quality is concerned. You know that? Now, E is because we're using the gas in a tank, we can make a larger variety of heaters. We make blower heaters, we make salamander heaters, we make gradient heaters, we make infrared heaters, we make torches, and all of these are because you're using a gas fuel in a bottle. Okay? Some of the facts you need to know to be intelligent about propane is just what it's all about. If you start at the top and read down, it's a very simple list. It says 1 bottle of propane, or 1 pound of propane, is 22,680 BTUs of heat. It's the simplest thing in the world. Then you just use arithmetic to figure out how many BTUs you have in the different size bottles. The bottle that I have this propped against is a 20-pound cylinder, came off of a Turco grill. Tell that, right? I sell gas grills too, El Patio gas grills. Don't sell them to Quality. Now that bottle is a 20-pound cylinder, and a 20-pound cylinder has 453,600 BTUs of heat in it. No more, no less. When it's full, that's what it's full of. Some of the things that'll help you understand better about how these things work, the Turco grill that you sell has either a 20,000 BTU burner or a 40,000 BTU burner, are what we call the 2040. They got new model numbers now, and I don't remember what they are. But they'll burn about 1 pound of propane per hour when you got the grill on, up to 2 pounds if you got up to 40,000. So if he's using a 20-pound cylinder, and a 20-pound cylinder's got 453,000, you're talking about 10 to 12 hours worth of cooking on that 20-pound cylinder. That's the only place on gas grills you get into trouble. Because when you get the steaks half done, or the pork chops half done, and you run out of gas, and you got a whole bunch of people standing around waiting, you're in trouble. You know. On heaters, you know, the heaters we're going to talk about, you simply divide the heater. Now, the 3 portable tanks that are most common are the 20, 40, and 100s. There's 30-pound tanks, 35-pound tanks, 55-pound tanks. There's all kinds of sizes of tanks. There's that little yellow tank on my infrared heater is a 4-pound tank. There's all different size tanks, but the most common you'll run into is 20, 40s, and 100s. The 20s on campers and gas grills, the 40s will be on house trailers, and the 100s will be behind house trailers usually. You'll see 2 or 3 of them lined up that we call manifold together, or hooked together by piping, and that's what makes them run, okay? All you do is divide the heater into the BTUs, and you know what you got. If you got a 40,000 BTU heater, now see, I take 40, that's about 2 pounds per hour, right? At 22,680. That's 2 pounds per hour. If I got a 20-pound cylinder, I got about 10 hours of operation. That heater will run 10 hours off of that tank of gas. Now, our problem is, and your problem is going to be, that the customers that you're selling to don't recognize the fact that they've got to put a big, big, big bunch of tanks together to get the right gas flow to heat what they need to heat. If that was the 150,000 BTU heater, and it takes 150,000 divided by 22,680, you know, 8 pounds an hour, right? If you divide 8 into 100, you know real quick that you've got about 10, 11 hours, maybe 12 hours of operation if you don't use a thermostat. Should use a thermostat. These are the size bottles that we call portable cylinders that you pick up, put in the truck, take down to the filling station, have them filled, and bring them back. When you get above a 100-pound cylinder, the tanks outside of the farrowing houses and outside the farms are gallon containers. There'll be 100 gallons, 250 gallons, 350 gallons, 500 gallons, 1,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons. I've spec'd up a heater last Friday after Thanksgiving. That was last Friday, wasn't it? A 2 million BTU heater for a big construction job not a half a mile from my house, and they'll use a propane delivery tank truck to feed the heater. And they use 1 tank truck a day for a 2 million BTU heater. Now, if they don't put that tank truck on it, they might as well forget about the heater. That's what it takes for it to run. Okay? What I'm trying to get to you is that all during this last season, we talked to you guys about propane heaters. The things that I run into was that they said, well, the people don't like that 150 because it takes too much fuel. It don't take too much fuel. It just takes the right amount of fuel. It don't take any more fuel than that 155 air scoop, except it doesn't have a tank on it. You don't pour it in. You got to order it in a tank. And if you remember that. Now, a gallon of fuel, of propane, liquefied propane, equals 5 pounds. Now, we can get very fancy, very, very fancy with propane heaters, and I'm not going to because it isn't necessary for you to understand a lot of it. You know, we burn the vapor. This is loaded with a liquid. You can't hear it, but and the valving comes down on top 1.25 inches below the top of this tank. And what you use is the vapor that vaporizes off of that liquid. That's called a vapor heater. Now, we do have heaters that we run that valve all the way to the bottom of, and we pick up strictly liquid propane. That's when you get above 300,000 BTUs of heat, you need to pour liquid to it because you don't get enough vapor to run 300,000 BTUs. But we're not going to get into that because that'd only confuse you. But if somebody comes in and says, I have a liquid fired heater, then you tell them to go to his local propane guy because, believe me, it gets a little more complicated than just that. It's got to run through a vaporizer and go from liquid to vapor into an 1.5 inch burner nozzle and you're talking about a lot of heat. That's 2 million BTU unit we're talking about that I worked on. Cost the customer $4,800. That's the cost of the heater only. And that's the very smallest part of his heat. And he puts a thermostat on that heater to make it come on and go off, you know, electrically. Okay? That's just good common knowledge for you. Now, you've seen that before. You know, then when you get to that point, you say, how big a heater does the guy need? And that's the way you figure it. It's the length and the width and the height times the degrees Fahrenheit you want to rise, like from 0 outside to 70 inside, or 10 above outside to 70 inside, by a factor of 0.133, which is an engineering heat factor, and it'll give you the BTUs that you need. Now, yesterday we down in where we were yesterday, the store manager said his friend needed a heater, and he wanted us to work on it. In fact, and he said he's going to need about a 500,000 BTU heater, and I said, my gosh, how big a place he got. He gave us a specification exactly that. Is that right, Ben? It was. He said the building's 40 foot long, 30 foot wide, and 15 foot high, and I said, well, he doesn't need 500,000, he needs 150,000. He couldn't figure out why he had figured the 500,000. See, he was thinking that he had a big area and he needed a big heater. That's the only thing that he reasoned with. But this now, believe me, as a mechanic, you got to always believe in the variables. You know, if the guy's got nothing but visqueen between you and zero weather, you don't use just that formula. You've got to use a little common sense and say, if there's nothing but a piece of canvas between you and zero weather and you want 70 degrees in here, you're going to have to double that, right? That's for a good common confined housing type of application where you got a decent wall between you and outside. If a guy's got an old barn and he's got holes in it big enough to spit through, you know, you got to make provisions for it. So use good common sense when it comes to that. But this gives you the good rule of the thumb. Okay, with that out of the way, let me get my National Riverside book here and I'll show you something. National Riverside, as a propane heater manufacturer, manufactures a little 40,000 BTU heater, 40. That's the 40,000 BTU heater. It's not even in the catalog yet. And a 60,000 BTU heater and the 150,000 BTU. The most popular propane heater built in the world today is the 150,000 BTU heater. It's an automatic ignited heater that does everything for you. All you got to do is put the bottle to it and plug it in the wall. It's a beautiful heater. And I wish I had one here to tear down for you and show you how beautiful it is. It comes apart very easy. And since I don't have one, you notice it's got 2 screws on the back side and 2 on the other side and 2 screws on the handle. If you take the 2 screws off the handle and those 2 and the back 2, the motor assembly lifts off and you look down into this box where all of the electrical connections are. In this part of the unit, you see the motor and the fan assembly. And in the front of the other part, this part, will be the back side of the combustion chamber with all of this heat sensor switches on it that you can change in just a few minutes. It's a very easy heater to work on. Very, very simple. Now, the 40,000 will go through, but on the 60,000 BTU heater, you have these in the store, and the reason you have them there is that sales-wise, it's got a, am I doing that on you? Sales-wise, it's one of the most saleable heaters we built. It's a little heater with a pilot light on it. It's a little tiny furnace that you hang in the corner of confined hog houses. It was made for hog houses, designed for hog houses. It's got a fully enclosed motor for hog houses. We made this heater about 11 years ago and became very, very successful with it. We called on all the people who made confined hog houses and sold them this heater as a OEM account to place in confined hog houses as they built the houses and shipped them. Now, it's built for a 20 by 20 confined hog house building. If you have a double building, you have a 20 by 40, you use 2 of the heaters. You have a 20 by 60, you use 3 of the heaters. Okay? And so forth. We have them, you know, where they in 20-foot modules, we have them as long as 500 foot long with heaters right on down the line, and they're all put in permanently and hooked up permanently. They got their own little thermostat on it. You simply plug it into the gas and set your thermostat, and away you go. If one end of the house isn't being used, there's no sows in it, you only burn half of the units. It's all each one independent. It's a beautiful heater. There's only one thing on that heater that ever gives us any problem, and that's a little bitty tiny heat sensor switch that's up on top of the combustion chamber, and it's a high heat cutoff switch. We have found a few defective high heat cutoff switches. When you run into one where the pilot won't stay on, that's the switch you change. You simply take off 3 screws on this side, 3 on the other side, 1 on the back side, and that whole shell lifts right straight up off the heater, and it all sits there and looks at you. Real easy heater to work on. And now, 7 years ago, L.B. White Company in Onalaska, Wisconsin decided that they were going to build the same heater, and they started building the same damn heater that we built. Then they built a 40,000 BTU, one a little bit smaller, and they built one a little bit larger, 115,000, and they built 168,000, and they all look like this. Physically, they get larger. And they sell them only through exclusive wholesalers in each state. So in the state of Indiana, in Delphi, there's a farm wholesaler who sells the L.B. White heaters. They sell them to dealers. Their cost of those heaters is the same as your company's cost. They sell them to dealers who have to sell them to the farmer. And they sell thousands of them. And I told your people, I said, you buy that heater and you put it on the floor where it can be recognized and seen. Now, I guarantee you, the prices you say, the way you mark up things, you're going to sell them like crazy. Now, outside of that heat sensor switch, we just haven't had any problem with the unit at all. And you'll know it immediately if the pilot won't stay lit. That's the only thing you have to worry about.
Is there a thermocouple in there in that pilot?
Well, that's the part I'm talking about. It's not a thermocoupling as we know a thermocoupling. It's a different type of thermocoupling. Okay?
It's the same thing.
Same thing, though. Now, we also make a 350,000 BTU heater, a big one. You won't be worried about that, but you might be asked about it. Somebody might say, well, I know that heater, but don't you have that big one? This heater is a high-pressure heater using liquid propane. When you work with a 1/3 of a million BTU heater, it takes a lot of gas. So we run liquid propane into the unit, run it through a line of coils that we call vaporizers, and then from there it goes out the nozzle and burns like hell. It's a big heater. And by the way, I just got word yesterday, and I know you'll be happy for me, that we just sold all of our 3500s. It's just this kind of weather that cranks it up, and well, when they go fast, you know. Now, the company makes a 250,000 BTU propane salamander. This is the one that you carry in stock, and a 100,000 BTU radiant heater. This is the one you carry in stock. You carried my salamander in stock for years, but now Dave Nadnovich got turned around and ordered this heater instead of mine, so I lost that one this year, you know. So what the false story is, you know, and the I'll shut up. 10-4? Okay. Now, you notice that there's a picture of a horizontal-looking heater. This is called a horizontal salamander. Yeah. It's nothing more than a torch stuck in a round 10-inch tube. I went on a big job just an hour before I sold that $2 million job, and the guy said to me, got it made, Vocker, I don't need your damn heaters. I just need a bunch of torches. And I said, what are you going to do? He takes 10-inch steel pipe, and runs a torch, a propane torch in the end of them, a 500,000 BTU torch, and that's his heater. Now that's all right unless if the OSHA people stays off his back, see. But if he sticks that torch in that tank and he burns up the joint, it's all his. His insurance won't even help him. Now, on the 60,000 and on the 150 and on the two salamanders, the Radiant and the salamander, you can't order them natural gas. You can't make your units natural gas. Now this is a 40,000 BTU propane heater. If we were to hook this up to natural gas and make it work, it would be putting out about 20,000 BTUs of heat. But our big problem is you look in the front of that heater, the thermocoupling and the heat sensor switch are all located for propane flame to come out. And if you hook this up to natural gas, the chances are that those safety units would not heat up properly and the heater wouldn't stay lit, okay? Jeff, take your screwdriver and take those, that screw and that one and same on the other side off for me, will you? The guy that owns next Riverside, a guy named Leland Shuey, really bugged us for years about the little 40,000 BTU oil heater. He said that making a little 40,000 was dirty pool, that we shouldn't make a little unit like that. And we told him every year that what he should do is make us a little propane heater that we call a utility heater that would be used for garage heating. If a guy wanted to use snowmobiles and monkey with his whatever in the garage. And last year they made 50 of these units, sold them to the Michigan stores, debugged the little items that was bad, and this year brought out the first 40,000 BTU propane heater on the market. Now there isn't any other like that. Nobody makes one. Now the part that you must know is that this is the only blower heater that I sell that you cannot use a thermostat on. It's a manual ignition heater. In other words, when you get it plugged in, you hold in on the safety valve and you push in on a black button which ignites the propane and fires it. Some of the things I should tell you about. Now, see, your company is new in propane heaters, and you can tell it because here comes a heater to a repair station to be looked at, and there's no hose and regulator with it. You can't run that heater without a hose and regulator and POL fitting. Now, it just happens, you know, that I carry one along, you know. Got it? I don't care what anybody says, Jeff, you ain't dumb. You didn't catch that. Okay, let me show you something. POL. No, I've been at this business for a long time. P period, O period, L period is what this little nut and that special taper is called, and it's a left-hand nut, and it's designed to work only in a propane tank, and it's called a POL fitting, and I've never found anyone who told me what POL means. It's just POL fitting. It's a whole lot like BTUs. You know, we constantly talk about BTUs, but by golly, I tell you, it takes a heck of a bullshitter to tell you what British thermal units means, or how you arrive at it. I've read it, and I've read it, and I've read it, and I've tried to break it down where I can tell Tim what BTUs really means, and there's no way you can simplify it. So I just forget it. It's just a method of measuring. It's terminology, right? It doesn't mean any more than that. So we use these terminologies as to 100,000 BTU heater, and we all understand it. We don't necessarily have to know how we arrive at it. POL fitting's the same way. Now, we got a problem. Regulators, when that gas tries to escape from that tank, it's under a high pressure, usually about 60 pounds. For that heater, we want to cut the pressure down from 60 pounds down to 11 inches of water column. Oh, boy, it smells money. It smells like rotten eggs, don't it?
smell it.
You can't smell that? You will in a minute. That cigarette's going to let you know it's there. Shoom! Did you guys know that you have a cutting torch in your shop? Do you have an oxygen tank, cutting torch? You know, back in my days when I was in construction, back when I used to drink and carouse and raise cane, do you know that you could have a good hangover and you can get up near an oxygen tank and just give yourself a good blast and take a real deep breath of it and it'll clear your head up like that? Did you know that? It sure will. And if you do it too many times, you'll get high. You know, man, it'll make you hyper.
Look at Kitty's face.
Sniffing oxygen. Did you guys ever do that?
You ever sniff the onion?
No. I've seen guys that do it and talk real squeaky. Yeah. Now, there is 11 inches of water column regulators. There's 5 to 20 pound high pressure regulators. Then there's 0 to 35 PSI regulators. I think I got one around here someplace. This is a high pressure regulator and it says on it 35 PSI. You can see it right there. Preset regulator. Each regulator is designed to be used on a different heater. This regulator, as an example, is the same regulator that goes on your 100R radiant heater. Now, if you take that regulator off of that heater and you put that regulator on, you get a flame about that big. It just don't work. Now, what you have in your store and what your problem is going to be is that, see, they take the heater out of the box, and this is not hooked to the heater, and they take this and put it one place, and they put that heater someplace else, and they're going to say to you, Jeff, where's the hose and regulator goes that heater? And you're going to say, well, who took it out of the box, and why didn't they put it on? They should take it, you know, it's a very simple, right? It's got a nut that turns all by itself and everything. So you're going to have to watch them yourself to make sure that they put the heater and the hose and the regulator all together. Don't let them get it scattered because it's going to run you nuts, believe me. Now, we talked about this, Ben and I, over the last week, and we think what we're going to try to do is make you up a chart that will give you the, like this is Marshall's brass regulator, there's Fisher regulators, Rigo regulators, made by many different people. We're going to give you the numbers of the regulators and the manufacturer that makes the 11 inches of water column regulators. So that if you pick this up and you look at it and you read it, it'll say a Marshalltown Model 210 is 11 inches of water column, because it don't say it on the regulator. There was a time up to about 6 years ago that they color-coded these things. They made them green. And all green regulators were low pressure 11 inches of water column regulators, okay? And all high pressure regulators were red, and all high pressure adjustable regulators had a turn knob on top of them. They didn't have a turn knob, they were preset, prefixed. So we're going to try to work that out and do that for you, just because it's going to be tough on you. Now, another thing, before we get into heaters, this hose has printed on it, maximum working pressure 350 PSI, 2079 CGA Type 1, 51-704 Snap-Tight Incorporated, Union City, Pennsylvania, hose number M87596, UL approved. Now, I've said that to you because you see, fellas, if any of your people go in there and grab air hose, which looks very much the same, and puts air hose on propane heaters, it could be a fatal mistake for someone. It's got to say LP gas hose on the hose. Warn everybody of that. Don't, you know, if somebody comes back and says to you, I need an extension hose, we're going to have a list of those for you, 10, 20, and 30-foot extension hose that will be on that same chart. And you tell them it's got to be special hose for propane. You can't use air hose. Most of the stores I saw had the heater department adjacent to the compressor paint spray department, and there's all the paint spray hoses, and it looks very, very much the same. And if you look at the end of these hoses, see, that's nothing more than a 1/4-inch national pipe thread. That's the same thing you have on an air hose. You have 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch, right? Or 1/2 inch. And is there any questions? Any confusion on it? Do you understand what I'm telling you? Now this little 40,000 BTU really drove me nuts. I can give you an example of a guy who worked on a heater, and I couldn't figure out why they built it the way they did, because I couldn't figure out how do you get to everything. So I figured what I'd do, and I got it down as far as Jeff got it, I'd take these screws off, and then I could get to it. Well, you take those screws off, and all you can do is peek into it, you know. And it finally came to me about the middle of the afternoon, about the time I was calling the engineer everything but a white man, that you just take that screw off and that screw off, take those off for me. And underneath it is all the goodies. But we're doing this for one reason, because in the 40,000 BTU heater, although this is the first full year for it, I can see one weak spot that I am personally anticipating having problems with. And we might as well look at it together. I don't think we'll have any problem with the motor. See, the motor does nothing but drive the fan, and the fan, if somebody doesn't really stick a screwdriver in it, doesn't take any torque or create any problems. The high heat limit switch that's up on top shouldn't give any problem, because it's the same switch we use on the 150 FA, and we've been using it for years. It's not a problem child. The spark plug is the standard spark plug that we use on the 150 FA, and that shouldn't give us any problems. But the problem is going to come in the thermocoupling. I know all of you understand how thermocoupling works, don't you? This is the safety valve that I took off of a 100 radiant heater. Now, 100% safety valve means that if I set this thing on pilot and I push it in like that, when I push it all the way in, I'm pushing the valve open against a heavy spring and allowing the gas to pass through the valve. In this housing is a little electromagnet that is energized by millivolts of electricity that's created when this little gadget is put under a heat source. Now, putting it under a heat source means that it's a nickel alloy center, then an insulating material, and then a stainless steel on the outside. And when it's heated, it creates millivolts of electricity. Don't ask me how. I don't have the slightest idea. But let me show you. I think it's the cutest thing in the world. Now, it's been around as long as I have. I guess these things, what would you say, Francis, 50 years old? Yeah. Now, in this area is the electromagnet. When I pushed that valve open, all I was doing was pushing it open like that. And theoretically, when you turn it loose, it's flop back and seal the gas. Okay? Now, let's see what I got to light. Who's got a match? Now, we're now going to assume that that's a pilot, right? And we'll stick it right in the pilot. And I'll just hold the valve shut with my finger. And after it heats for just a second, it should stay open. Is it open? Now, the heater's running, right? And that's staying in the fire, so as long as it's creating that electricity, the valve will stay open. Then if we cool it quickly, which if it was in a cold atmosphere it would. I was going to cool it some more. And it pops back, and that's your safety valve. Your hot water tank at home, if you have a gas hot water tank, has exactly the same gadget on it. Except that valve will have an adjustment where you can turn the thermostat to a higher degree or a lower degree. It's got a little variation to it. But all safety valves are made this way. This heater has a safety valve on it. That's the reason we can't put a thermostat on it And as you look into it, as you look inside, this is the safety. Where you push the red button, you push the valve open. But they put something else on it that I think we might have problems with. And it's a junction box on the electric wiring so that we can take the millivolts of electricity from there to the control board and back to there. Now, the reason I think we might have problems is that we had this same thing on the 100S Champion Salamanders years ago when OSHA said that we had to, absolutely, had to have a tip-over switch. If you tip over the heater, it had to shut itself off. And we put that on, and of course, on that junction box, we put a mercury valve that when you turned it sideways, it would shut out the thermocoupling and turn the heater off, right? And the problem we had with it was that those terminals would corrode, get the least bit loose. Now you're working with 1,000 millivolts per volt. You know, that ain't enough to, you know, if I took this off and held that on my finger and held it over the fire, I'd feel nothing. You don't feel a thing. There's not enough there to feel. Now, if that's the case, and those get corroded, that's where I think we might have problems. About the best we can do, I think, is if everybody want to come up here and take a look at it, I think it'd be better than trying to pass it around everyone. Yeah. Yeah. This is the thermocoupling, and it comes up right here, and you see the junction box that goes over to the relay. That's the only place I can see on this heater where we could have any sweat at all. Now, in the stores, you all know that as we had the sales meetings, I fired one of these up at every store. Fired it up, let them look at it, let them feel it, let them taste it. They'd say, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" You know, wow. Well, why don't we leave it sitting like that for a minute, and we'll talk just a bit more. Now, this is another heater that I sell, but I don't sell the quality. But I brought it along to illustrate. When we say a variety of heaters, what we talk about varieties. This is an infrared heater, and it's a very unique designed heater. It actually will cast infrared rays and heat what it sees, not the air, not the whole area. It'll heat a particular area. If you two guys had to sit at that table and do a one type of job, let's say telephone, and there's no heat in here, we could mount this where it's shining down on the two of you and keep you perfectly warm, and it wouldn't heat the rest of this room. It'll heat through glass. If it can see you, it will heat you. I know you've all, during zero weather, sit inside of a window and have the sun rays come down and you feel that warm, beautiful heat. See that those infrared rays coming down from the sun go through all that cold air, but it heats solids. Now, what this is one of my pride and joys. You know, we older guys invent things. We don't really invent things. We put things together. This is two 12,000 BTU infrared heaters. And what I did was I made two separate heaters, and then on the bottom I put two safety valves. Now you can burn one, or you can burn two, or you can burn either one. Now the idea, this is used mainly over twin farrowing pins, two farrowing pins. And it's supposed to be set where each round face looks at a farrowing pin, looks at a sow. Well, if one sow is finished farrowing and she doesn't need that heat anymore, you sure don't need to burn the heater. So you simply turn it off and burn just the one side. It also has a very nifty little new regulator that you can adjust the heat from 5,000 BTUs up to 24,000 BTUs. So you can, if it gets warm enough where you don't need all the heat, you can turn the heat down. I need a match, not a lighter. Oh, you'd make me do that, wouldn't you? Oh, I tell you. I did this Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was back in the shop repairing air tools, paving breakers, and I guess the 13th one I picked up, they weigh 100 pounds apiece, hit me, and it hit me right there. And now, as long as I'm standing strict like this, I'm all right. But when I bend, it hurts. You know, or I sit and get up, it hurts. I haven't, you know, I've been away from home so much, I don't even know if it hurt when I screw. I'll try that Saturday night, because Friday I'll be driving. Yeah. My wife said, she said, you know what? You're getting to think that this place is nothing but a laundromat and a whorehouse. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, all you want is a clean shirt and a piece of tail, and you're on your way again, you know. So, come on. She heard me tell my other best joke. I tell everybody that my wife told me she has a sex party every Friday night, and if I went in on it, I better be home, you know. My wife wouldn't say shit if she had a mouthful. So, you know, she looks at me and says, "Gene Vocker," and I said, "Well, just a joke." You know? But the guy he said, "Hey Tim, let's go out and get a little bit of strange stuff." And Tim said, "Man, I got more I can take care of at home." He says, "Okay, let's go to your house." Guess you never heard that before, had you? No. That's older than I am. Still a goodie, though. Now, you'll see what I mean in a minute. Can you feel that? Now, we make infrared heaters up to what we call 4 panels. They're up to 50,000 BTUs. The many things that's good about an infrared heater, the only thing that can happen on that heater that you have to work on is the thermocoupling go bad. And you got them in stock at the store, and all you do is pull one and put one. You know, it's that simple. But the many things it does, you notice it's absolutely silent. It doesn't take any electricity. So for use for standby heat, it's just the greatest thing in the world. You know, for emergency heat, it's great because it doesn't take any electricity. Because it's a miser, it uses about 1 pound of propane per hour, means that it would run 20 hours on this 20-pound cylinder, so it doesn't cost much to run the heater. Now, this particular heater is going to be used in ice fish shacks, because when I get done with it tomorrow, it's going to belong to Ben, see? And Ben's going to go ice fishing.
Well, you set up straight then, so you don't know the whole night.
You might still lose your seat.
Yeah, I'll sing you some of that ice by catching. Okay.
Now, the reason I show it, of course, is that I hope to convince your company to start putting these in stock. But unfortunately, it isn't a heater that sells itself off of the shelf. If you'd sit that in the heater department and just leave it sit, it would never sell. Just don't sell. Because the people looking at it don't really understand what it does. Who's the guy from Noblesville? Were you there when I was there with the sales meeting?
I will.
You were. Do you remember me showing that heater? And the guy that walked through and took it away from us? I had one heater with me for that week and showed the heater like we're doing now, talking about it, and this customer was standing behind looking, and he said, "That's exactly what I want." And I said, "Well, yeah, but we don't sell those here. We're just talking about it." "I don't care. I want it." Paid 99 bucks for it and walked out the front door with my heater. Okay. The idea is that with gas, you can do a lot of things. You can make infrared heaters and radiant heaters. That radiant heater, the round one, has a peculiarity to it. When you light it up, now all it has is that safety valve I just showed you, this one, and that thermocoupling. The only thing go wrong with it is the electromagnet or the thermocoupling. That's the only thing on the heater that can go bad. It takes 15 seconds for a blind man to change it. You know, it's just a very easy heater to keep working, but it doesn't take electricity, and the way that perforated combustion chamber is made, it actually will radiate infrared rays, and you'll feel the rays even in a drafty area. The big idea, of course, is that it's to be used in draftier areas than a salamander. A salamander is nothing more than a convection heater. It just sits there and heats. If you could color the air, you'd see that as it heats, the air goes up very rapidly and is sucked in by vacuum underneath and goes up through that combustion chamber. When it hits the ceiling, it'll go over and come back down and go back up through that heater, and eventually, of course, it'll heat the area that it's sitting in. A salamander is the Greek mythical god of fire, called a salamander. Now, I don't know where in the hell they got it, but somebody stuck it on it years ago, and it sticks. That oil salamander's made that way, the gas salamanders, it's the cheapest heater built, and it has the same type of valve on it, and it has the same electromagnet and thermocoupling. That's all that can go wrong with the heaters. Your biggest single reason for those heaters is emergency standby for hogs and greenhouses and stuff. And now see, you can turn the heater down where you're getting just about half the heat. You can feel it now, can't you?
Yeah.
And the closer you get to it, the more intense the heat is. And I could put a sheet of plate glass between you and that heater, Jeff, and you'd feel the heater. Neat. Now that's a flame, and that flame means it's got to have oxygen. That means you got to have ventilation, right? You just got to have it. Yeah. Okay, I just turned a little bit too far. Let's just turn it off because it's going to be too hot to handle. Okay, getting off of that kick, I want to talk to you briefly about another idea. Now these are ideas. Now this has not went into production. This is a brand new heater in your stores, a 40,000 BTU heater. We recognize that one of our problems, distribution problems with John up in parts, is that how does he get to you the parts you might need to correct this heater if this heater were to malfunction or something should happen to it and the customer brings it back to you. The whole idea is to quickly get the customer satisfied and back out, right? If you get him repaired and get him going, man, your troubles will be 1/10 of what they normally would be. So I put together a box, and the box says that this is for the 40FA National Riverside Heater, and this is a suggested starter parts inventory in a box with a spot on it to show you what your sales were and what your remaining inventory in this box would be, and a good example of what you might need. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to need some of these parts ever, but the chances are that you could possibly need them. So what you would receive would be this box. Take your knife and you cut the top of it out and simply sit it on the parts shelf, and that's the box for the 40FA. Now, if you like the idea, and if corporate likes the idea, we can get the idea through to them, we would do this for you on all new heater products. In other words, the 60FA, which is a new item for you, we would have that for you in a box. The 150FA, the 100RA, and each one individually boxed so that you would know that those parts in that box go to those heaters, and if you need them, that's where you find them. And you have to express your thoughts about this to Benny before we leave today. Tell him whether you like it or not. It's a little off the base of what you normally do on parts, but when you get 24 stores and 24 repairmen and a parts service center and the distribution problems, these are the things that we try to work. We're going to try to work on to help you do the job better, right, Benny? It's a shame, but National Riverside promised me one service manual like this for each of you. And of course, I didn't get them. But we will get them probably in the next couple of days. They'll probably be in St. Louis when I get back Saturday. And I will send them off to Ben, and Ben will see that you guys get one. And they do a nice job on the service manual with all the parts and the descriptions and the causes and the reasons and all the rest of it. And it'll help you understand. If you've got problems on a 100RA, you can open it up and it'll tell you what to look for, right? Nice hardback cover. Now, while I'm thinking about it, National Riverside is a very persnickety manufacturer. You cannot take it upon yourself to repair any National Riverside heater under warranty and expect to be paid for it. If you have a warranty problem, you must call National Riverside directly, collect, tell them your problems, they'll tell you what to do, and then they'll give you a number that you will use in indicating that you received an approval. They're very sticky about it, and I don't really understand why, because on Champion, we tell you to use your own judgment. If you think, if that heater's 5 years old and you think it should be repaired under warranty, you honestly feel that way, babe, you do it, and we'll stand behind it. We believe in it. And you guys are not going to take advantage of us. And all we all need is good, happy customers. Now, I brought a couple of pictures. I thought you might like this because it might just bring you along the heater line. If you notice on this picture, the front of it shows a confined hog house, and it's got a long-looking jobby up here in front. That's called an LB White Make-Up Air Hog Barn Furnace. The concept is that in a hog house, you have such tremendous corrosion problems because the hog breathes through its mouth, and it's terrible. It really, you know, a hog, it either comes out the rear end or out the front end, and everything that comes out is corrosive. This heater is built to mount on the outside of a building. It takes the outside air and heats it, propane, puts it inside the building, and pressurizes the inside of the building. You guys ever walk into a big department store and feel the air hit you as you walk through the door, just briefly? That building has a make-up air furnace on its roof. And it's taking outside air, either air conditioning it or heating it, and put it inside the building and pressurizing it. You'll notice something else about that particular building. There'll be no odors. You won't smell anything. So that's the idea of this heater, is that this heater takes the outside air, heats it, puts it inside, and raises the pressure inside, and every hole in the building, the air will try to escape, and it picks up all the moisture and puts it outside. Now, you'll see some of them. When you see them, you'll understand what it's all about. This is a picture of a hog with 2 heaters in his eyes. Those are the LB White counterparts to our 60,000, our 60 FA. I brought this in because, you see, 80% of the heaters that you sell and work on, 80% of the heaters I sell go to the hog farmer for hog raising. This is the biggest business going for us today.
Shut, damn it, don't blow.
Yeah. Right. Ben, why don't you come take over? I think I've done it. Ain't I done it?
Have you got any questions?
Don't mumble. Speak up. Now, do you want the mic on Ben?